Intro. So this is going to be different. Instead of doing the usual summary, story, gameplay, and how to make it better, I'll be going over the Militia side missions, all of them, and I'll be talking about each gameplay loop. There will be no how to make it better section. This would be under the umbrella of changing all the side quests, so this will be saved for another time. This time we'll be mostly talking about the main gameplay loops of the game / side quest wise. They may be a bit longer than other videos in this series, but that's only because there's a lot to cover. Summary. So basically the Militia have been taking over parts of the open world, and it's up to you / Batman to free everyone. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I literally wrote improvise because there's not much to summarize here. Campaign for Disarmament. Tank. So this one's okay, I guess. I'm not much of a fan of the tank system, but I must admit they did mostly a good job. I have my issues with the tank system, but I don't think it's bad. But this will be revealed later down the road. But first, let's go over the enemy design. It's actually okay. There are a few drone types, one which is easy, one of which is a double barrel normal type, a bit harder, a little helicopter thing which is easy, and a tank which is really hard to destroy, and last but not least, the missile launcher. This isn't hard on its own, but when all of them are together, it's quite challenging, and that's where the system shines. Juggling back and forth with multiple enemy types genuinely makes the gameplay investing. Now, is there an argument to be made against this? Sure, there are, but they're weak. One, I could be playing a game of footsie as the only way to get hit is a bit too easy, which the counterpoint would be, dude, it's not easy, especially when the game is throwing everything you got. Another counterpoint against the tank enemies is the lack of variety, which I halfway agree with, because there are quite a few enemies, but I think the system would overall improve due to more enemy types. While this system flexes your brain power dealing with a lot of enemies, I think we can all agree more enemy types here, the better the system. Obviously not too much, but more than we've got. So is the enemy design good? Yes. It needs improvements, but it's still a good system. Now that that system's out of the way, we can go over the next system, which is, your special powers of having a tank. You need something, right? More than just shooting, so what is it? Well, we have hacking that takes control of other enemy tanks. Another one is the missiles, which does exactly what you think it does, and an EMP that stuns other tanks in the area of effect. One more. There's a bar with a circle or whatever that changes up the more tanks you hit. It's basically just an increase in number of anything of your abilities. Like hacking is now, it hacks 2 more missiles, etc. Now we need to talk about these things. As you may tell, I don't have much footage of me using the EMP or the missiles, and that's because they're both useless. Well, to be fair, the missiles have some purpose. Clearing a ton of tanks with spamming a button never isn't satisfying. But the reason they feel useless is because the hacking is so good. Let me explain. In the last section we talked about why the system works, and that's because the multitasking element of the enemies. But with the hack, that's immediately thrown out the window. Say you're surrounded by a group of tanks, so you hack one or more. This immediately takes the pressure off of you because the tanks are now firing at the hacked tanks. As I've said before, the multitasking element is the core part of the combat system. And as soon as you use that hack, that multitasking element is in that second greatly lessened. So this takes away from a lot of the challenge of being a part of the game as a whole. So this damages not just the side mission, but hurts the game overall. And that's my problem with the abilities you're given. One of them is overpowered, one of them is only used in certain circumstances, and the EMP is straight up useless. So what am I supposed to say about this system? It's not good in terms of abilities, but it could use a lot of work. Difficulty. It's not super important, but I wanted to mention it. Unlike the side quest in most games, the difficulty of each section is completely different. For some reason, the order that you do this in is completely up to you. which gives me mixed feelings. On one hand, giving more choices to the player is good, but on the other hand, if you don't check and you accidentally get way more than you're expecting. So I'll leave this up to you to judge. Overall. So now for the final verdict for the tank system. Is it good? Is it bad? I mean, Sure, the base gameplay is good with the enemy types, the act of making you multitask, but the tools in your kit need a lot of work. As of recent, my mind has changed quite a lot about the tank system, but one thing has remained the same. A good example of this is the Combat and Predator sections. Combat and Predator sections have been in the game, or in the franchise, since Arkham Asylum. So by the time you get to Arkham Knight, everything's like refinish. Now, if they introduce like the Batmobile in City or Asylum or, Origins, for all I care, there could have been a lot more improvement added and more detail to it that would have made Knight a much better experience. But since they added these things last minute, it leads to a lot of issues. And that's my problem. You can't add a system like this in the last game and expect it to be good as your previous system that you had time to iron out the mechanics of. I know it's easy to hate on this system because it's cool to do, I guess, but while it has issues, it's not bad. In fact, most of the time, it's pretty engaging. There are issues with it that shouldn't be ignored, but I'm also saying it isn't bad, and it isn't great either. Armored and dangerous. Car. Let me say right off the bat, enter joke, I'm not the biggest fan of this, but we won't know until we start this thing, so. Enemy design. Is there an enemy design? Is there an enemy design? Most of them are the same. I mean, sure, there is the main one, the one you're tracking, and then there's the other lesser ones. There are no real enemy types here. It shows a complete lack of effort on the side of development. You could just add more than at least 2 enemy types. Really? Is it that hard? The game could have been easily benefited from this and from more enemy types in general. I know I say that every time, but here it certainly is the case. The ability of the car. Wait for it. It drives. Bet you never guessed that one. It shoots missiles. It does a small shuffle, and that's about it. Oh, it drifts. Yeah, it drifts like a car does. Yeah. So that's something. Oh yeah, boosties. It can do that. As you can tell, it's very in depth. Yet again, needs to be worked on and expanded upon. Loop. And yet we're in the same situation before, where you have to make up for the lack of a true race or a basic driving section, where we're just left to do loops around the open world. It's a real shame, that's all. Okay, rant time. Overall, this driving system is completely and utterly poorly executed. I hate to see a good system like this. Well, the system really isn't that good, but it could be good. A good example of this is the enemy design, which is poor and useless. Wow, that's my rant. Wow, that's a short-ass rant. Occupy Gotham. Error. Part 1. The idea. Instead of talking about this the normal way in each section where I talk about both in different ways. First up, the idea. What is that idea? Well, to be clear, the idea is that Batman has to take control of Gotham one bit at a time. So, being harder than others, at least. The checkpoints are supposed to annoy you by shooting at you while you fly by, or the roads blocking and getting in your way. So, is this a good idea? To me, hell yes. Forcing the player to destroy the checkpoints one by one is satisfying. And let me make this clear, not a lot of open world games do this. Mostly because pulling this off is really hard. But should others follow this path? It depends on the game, really. If you want your open world to more focus on the atmosphere rather than the difficulty, then you probably shouldn't use it. But if you want your open world to have a bit of a challenge, then by all means go for it. Just know that this has to be done well. Know that this all depends on Arkham Knight with a heavy, substantial amount of weight on it. Did it do this with flawless execution, or did it fail miserably? Well, the answer is nuanced. Own the roads. Land. Part 2. And this is where the problems start to form. Your idea is good, but the way you handled it isn't the best. Like mentioned in the last section, it's supposed to get in your way, but it never does. Worst case scenario is that you'll see it and then you'll move out of the way and continue on to wherever you're going. But this is nothing more than a minor inconvenience. And we know this isn't what they were going for with this dialogue.
When's our relief getting here? I want to go on a bat hunt. Not till morning, soldier. Till then, we keep this tower locked down. So the Knight spends months teaching us how to kill the bat, only to make us wait up here all night? This is how you kill the bat, idiot. You control the sky, you control the roads, you control the rooftops. You make it so we can't move without getting shot at or worn down. The bat knows Gotham inside and out. Thinks it's a secret weapon. Well, it's our weapon now.
Take a look straight in the mirror.
The bat's used to fighting street punks. He's never faced trained soldiers like us before.
This is what they wanted us to feel. In danger. And powerless. But with a mere hand wave, these checkpoints aren't much of a problem. A great example of this is the roadblocks things. When the fuck have they ever gotten in your way? The only way I've seen are the mines, but they're so rare I can barely have the footage to show you. The roadblocks are off to the side where they can easily not be noticed and let you just carry about your day. Wouldn't it be cool if the roadblocks actually blocked off some areas of the road instead of just being thrown to the side and ignored? I mean, seriously, you can just drive right by them. So what becomes of this once great idea? Nothing more than a checklist. That's what happens when you strip away the depth and challenge to it. You have left it nothing but hollow. And as we've seen before our very eyes, a great idea crumbles. Boss, Deathstroke. Alright, time to cover one of the most controversial parts of the game. The boss, specifically the Deathstroke boss. Why is he a copy of the Arkham Knight boss? Not just any other Arkham Knight boss, but specifically the tank one. This has to be budget and or time reasons. I can't hear them in the room like, okay guys, what are we gonna do with the Deathstroke boss fight? Any ideas? Yes, you James. What if we just repeat the Arkham Knight boss fight? Genius, James. You've done it. You're now getting promoted to the president of video games and you get a cookie. Good job. So yeah, I don't see that being likely, but for whatever reason, it wasn't a good decision. I'll talk about this more in a later video, don't worry, but it's not too far from now. Story. Militia dialogue. I said this before and I'll say this again. The overhearing of the dialogue is some of the best dialogue in the game and one of the strongest points of the game. And here it's no exception. The militia gives us a perspective we don't often get. Usually whenever we hear dialogue, it comes from one of the criminals, coming from that point of view. But the militia forces are different, because a lot of them are ex-military, and because of this they have a great amount of stories to tell from their past. It's really good that we the players are able to hear this other than just some thugs. Having mental issues and giving them struggles humanize them a little bit. Not too much, but good enough. I mentioned this before in my In From the Cold video where I said that the checkpoints are the story of Batman versus the militia. It's time I expanded upon that. Sometimes we gamers, I hate saying that, forget that gameplay and story can be one and the same. Not all games are like this. Most games like to keep the two separated to simplify the art form, which is understandable. It's a hard thing to keep together. Some say that gameplay and story have always been the same, which isn't necessarily true, because most developers don't plan for this, at least not in a greater sense like we break it down. So what did I just mean in all that? The gameplay, or the act of taking down a checkpoint, is a story that the game wants to tell. So how is this story? Well, that depends on the gameplay. So how is the gameplay that tells the story? Gameplay is easy and out of the way. This kind of hurts the story. Think about it. The whole point of the militia story-wise is that they are a difficult force that Batman has never dealt with before, with advanced knowledge about him that not many know, and have the military experience as well. The gameplay doesn't reflect this. Sure, the Arkham Knight helps with the militia, but that's where the differences end. Medics and blowing out crates and mining gargoyles, all things that thugs can do, which undermines the militia. This hurts the story that they're trying to tell about the checkpoints too. Deathstroke. I'll make this quick. Is Deathstroke a good replacement for the Arkham Knight? In my view, yes. He has the most experience and has the best combat abilities of nearly all of Batman's rogues gallery. And let's face it, if he was in your shoes, that being Scarecrow's, would you choose the same? Or at least heavily consider it? So yeah, him being here makes sense. I do think he's a bit underused. A good example of this is, what exactly does he change exactly when he joins the militia? Hold on, I gotta look around here. Oh yeah, nothing. And that's my problem. He's treated like a placeholder, but oh well. Overall, we're nearly done. So we've arrived at the conclusion. What is the final verdict? So the militia in all the side quests are, in a bigger sense, what they're trying to accomplish is commendable, and still better than the previous games in terms of right rule 2. What they're trying to do is good, especially compared to most games, but it's ahead of its time, yes, but that's where the positive end, because when it stacks up with the pressure, it just doesn't quite work out. And finally, the boss puts a sore taste in my mouth. So yes, while the base system is overall good, I mean, it's pretty alright, but the lack of, well, anything. So I think without hesitation, I know what the score is. 5 out of 10. Mediocre. Fuck. And as soon as you use that hat, yep, he uses a hat. You heard it first here, folks. Batman uses a hat. It's a secret, weapon. Can I sniff you? Smell like ass. While this system flexes your brain power, fuck, what the fuck am I saying here? God, you know what I hate? I hate, like, I type stuff, and I don't really have an editor or anything, or I don't, like, proofread my script sometimes, and then I come here, and then I, like, highlight the portion that I have to read, and then I look at it, and I read it, and I'm like, do I have brain damage? That second, no, fuck it. Can't pronounce words, can't do the English, is greatly less. Can't fucking English! Word for the... God. I didn't even want to bang the table, but I banged it anyway. Alright, I've taken a shower now, so I'm a bit more relaxed. Let's get this shit over with. The Batman versus the Batman. The Batman, the TV show that is criminally underrated. Fucking hell. Wait, Logic's biracial? Hold on. At this point, I don't even care about the video. Oh, that's crazy. Oh, so he got the white jeans. And he's a rapper. Oh, that's great. Oh, that's great.